Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip, I'll be doing an overview of the brand new Skydio 2 drone and showing you some of the accessories that the company's released that can really enhance your flying experience. But before I get into this, I know some of you are probably thinking, Rick, the drone's been out for a couple of weeks. What took you so long? Well, the honest truth is, I ordered the Skydio 2 the day the website opened up, and like all of you, I waited patiently for the email to show up announcing, your Skydio 2 is ready, we're shipping it, and the email never came. Now, I know these guys are working 25 hours a day, and they've got robots flipping these drones around, doing all kinds of optical calibrations and all the other stuff they have to do to make this thing perfect, but I just wanted my drone. And we were leaving for a family vacation over the holidays, and 2 days before we left for the vacation, I got the email that the drone's on the way. So I'm camped out on the front porch, waiting for the UPS guy to show up so I can take this drone down there in the warm weather and fly it like crazy. Well, the drone never showed up. And as luck would have it, halfway through the drive to Florida, I get an email from UPS. Hey, we dropped off a box on your front porch. So you can imagine my frustration heading south. Well, this thing's sitting on my porch up here in the Northeast. So I couldn't wait to get back. I had a great vacation. We had a lot of fun down there, but I could not wait to get back and rip this thing open. Now, in a show of Zen-like restraint, I haven't opened up this package yet. I took it out of the box, but I have not opened this up yet. So I'm going to do it here for the first time. And I'm telling you right now, I'm extremely excited about this drone. And I know I get crazy with all the drones that are being released, but this one in particular is different. And I've talked about different drones coming along in prior clips where I thought they were kind of game changers. I mentioned the Mavic Pro when that first came out, and I thought that that was sort of a shift in the way drones are being built. It really heralded in a new era of drones in a lot of different ways. And a lot of companies have copied that design, and it really changed the design philosophy of a lot of companies. I think this one has the potential to do the same thing for autonomous flight. Now, I'll talk a lot about that in future clips, and I promise you, this clip's kind of an unboxing and a closer look clip, but I'm going to do a lot of clips talking about the technology behind it and what this technology means for our hobby, because I think what Skydio's got here is a new generation of drone that has artificial intelligence in it, that's autonomous, that does a lot of things really well, that's going to make drone flying safer and a whole lot more fun for a lot more people. So I'll get into all that in a later clip. But for now, I'm going to rip this thing open, and I'm being extremely patient. So let me get this thing, because they've got these zippers clipped together. So before I tear this thing open, I'm impressed with the case. So when I popped it out, it's a really nice, durable case. It's a crush-proof case, and everything fits inside the case. I think it'll hold 2 batteries too, but again, I haven't opened it, so I'll take a look. But it's water-resistant. It's got a heavy-duty zipper. It comes with a shoulder strap. It's got 2 clips on either side. You can put carabiners on them. I think they've done a great job, and I think a lot of the newer drone companies are starting to include cases like this to really protect their products, and I think it's a great idea. So they've cable-tied these guys together with a little piece of fishing line here. Let me cut that. Okay, so we'll get rid of that. All right, so now that it's open, let me look inside. So, man, this is like my favorite time. It's when a new drone shows up that I haven't played with yet, and I get to look at it for the first time. So, here we go. Woohoo! All right, so there's a getting started guide. There's a nice cleaning cloth, I guess, for the cameras, and there's the drone. Now, let me get this guy out. Oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. All right, so there's no battery. The battery compartment's on the bottom. There's a nice lock there for the gimbals. And I'll tell you, my first impression of this thing is it's built to last. This has got a very high-end feel. It's got a very professional feel. You can tell based on the gaps and the fit and form of this thing that the engineering behind this is incredibly solid. It's a mid-size weight kind of a drone, but it's a rigid frame. Now, that's something else a lot of people were asking about. They're like, well, why didn't they make one with a folding frame? You have to remember, they've got 6 cameras, 3 in the top and 3 on the bottom, that actually create this 3D bubble, this 360-degree bubble, where it's looking at things it could run into. And if it's extremely important that those things are calibrated correctly. So if you're folding out arms, there's too much play in those folding out arms to really ensure that kind of security all the way around the drone. So they had to make it a fixed frame. But give me a second here. Oh man, this is beautiful. This is a beautiful looking machine. They've done a phenomenal job with the engineering on this. So good on you guys at Skydio for this product. It's fantastic. So that's the drone. Let me set that down. Now, in addition to the drone, inside the case, there's a battery. There's a cable here. It's a nice heavy duty cable, which is a USB-C to USB-C. So I imagine the charger is also a USB-C. So oh, look at that. That's pretty cool. So they've actually built the charger into a little rubber foam holder that you can either carry the charger with you, or imagine you'll fit another battery on that side, but that's pretty cool. All right, so it's a fast charging charger, and it is a USB-C connection. So I'm sure you can use a standard charger that has a USB-A connection on it, but I would recommend whatever charger you're using be powerful and be a quick charging QC compatible charger. And that's what they've given you here. So it's a really nice charger, but it's a single port, and that cable will charge the drone. Now, if you only bought the drone, you'll charge the battery inside the drone, but they do make a 2-battery charger that, again, can use this USB-C connection and charge 2 batteries at the same time. All right, so the cable and the charger looks like 2 props for replacement. I imagine 1 clockwise, 1 counterclockwise, and the battery. And there's the battery, and it's got a nice protective cover on the battery. Now, one thing that's interesting about this, and I've got a lot of ideas for testing this thing, has to do with the way the magnetics attach the battery to the drone. So when you get this close to the drone, the magnetics clip it in place and the contacts are made to the drone. My curiosity initially is, if I've got a huge magnet like this getting close to the electronics on the drone, isn't that going to mess around with some of the electronics in there, like the compass, for example, and screw up the way the compass sees north? So we'll have to play around with that and see. But looking at the drone, they've got a little diagram up here where you can scan it with your camera and actually connect to the drone. And I'll show you how to do all that stuff. And in addition to the drone, I've got the controller, the beacon, the controller, the beacon, and the battery. So I'll open those next, but that's the drone. That's what it looks like. And again, very durable. It seems very nice. I love the color scheme on this. Blue's my favorite color, so that's pretty cool. And it looks like the gimbal lock is pretty straightforward. The only thing that I can pick on first glance is I'm not nuts about having the USB-C connection on the top surface of the drone. Now, again, I'm getting nitpicky here as an engineer, but what I'm worried about there is that gravity is your enemy, right? So if there's dust and debris and particles in the air, they're going to fall down, and they could fall inside that USB-C connection. That connects directly to the printed circuit board inside. I'm just guessing. I'm not going to take this thing apart like I've done with other drones, at least for a couple of weeks. But if that does touch the printed circuit board, and I'm flying this thing and it's a misty day or it's a rainy day, that port right there is an entry point to get at the electronics. So I'm going to have to think a little bit about that, and maybe we'll come up with a plug or something that can protect that down the road. But I love the design. I think it's really well built, and I really do like this case a lot. It's a case that will hold everything neatly. It'll hold 2 batteries, and it gives me pretty much everything I need in one spot to fly this thing. So that's the drone. Now let's take a look at some of the other stuff, and I'll start with, let's start with the battery. I'll open that next. So again, the battery is, I think it's about a $100 battery, but I would recommend getting it because your flight time on this drone in particular is 23 minutes. And I imagine if you fly it down to say 20%, you're not going to get 23 minutes out of it, obviously. So you probably get 15, maybe 18 minutes out of it. Okay, so there's the second battery. Basically comes in the box. In addition to that, nothing else, just the battery. Okay, so that's all I really need is the battery, so that's pretty cool. So there's the second battery, and I'll charge that up, get this guy outside and start flying it. Now let's take a look at some of the controllers. So I've got both the controller and the beacon. I'll open up the beacon first, because that's the one most people are going to go for. Now the beacon allows you to fly it further. So you can fly the drone with your cell phone, but you can only fly about 200 meters with your cell phone. The minute you add the beacon, you can fly 1.5 kilometers. So it gives you just a little over half a mile of distance. Well, that's a nice little package. I got to say, too, that the packaging for this stuff is all high-end. It's like you're buying a very expensive watch or very expensive cell phone. So, again, a getting started guide. There's the beacon. And I'll take closer looks and nothing else in the box. I'll take closer looks at all these things in a minute just to explain what the knobs and buttons and connectors do, but that's the beacon. Again, it's got GPS and GLONASS in it, and it's the way the drone knows where you're standing. Now, it doesn't care where you're standing. It cares where the beacon's standing. So I'm going to hang this from a tree and see if the drone pays attention to that or if it chases me, but that's the beacon. Pretty cool. Oh, it's got a nice little lanyard hook on the bottom of it, so good on you guys for that. And then the last is the controller. Now, we all know that this is a Parrot controller that's been modified with firmware to allow it to control the Skydio. So you can't use this to control your Parrot. You can't use the Parrot one to control the Skydio. They're different. All right, so inside the box, there's the controller, a getting started guide. Let's see if there's anything else. I imagine there's probably something under here like cables or there we go. So there's 2 sets of cables underneath there because just like with the Parrot controller, you got to connect your phone physically to the controller. And I'll show you how to do that when I do the closer look portion of it, but there's a connection on the back that's USB-C. That connects up to your phone. So in here, they've included 2 cables. One is the USB-C to Apple, and the other is USB-C to USB-C. So interestingly, they didn't include a USB-C to micro. So if you have an older phone, maybe you can't use it with this, but I'll do a lot of testing and let you know about that. So those are the start guides, the quick start guides, and that's the controller. And again, it's the same controller as the Parrot Anafi, which I like a lot. I like the form factor of the controller. So again, I'll take a closer look at all 3 of these in a minute, but that's basically what you get if you open up all the containers and all the stuff you get in the box is pretty much in front of you here. So good on you guys that you include the ability to fly with your phone, which will take you 200 meters, the ability to fly with the beacon, which is 1.5 kilometers, and if you use the controller, you can fly 2.5 kilometers, which is about 2 miles. So you can get quite a good distance out of it. The reason you're limited on your phone, obviously, is because the Wi-Fi signal in your phone can only transfer so far, and you're going to have, some limitations on that. But stay tuned, and what I'm going to do next is take a closer look at the drone itself, explain some of the stuff about the drone, point out some cool things that they built into it. Then I'll take a closer look at the controller, the beacon, and show you what goes on there. So stay tuned for that. We'll start off by taking a closer look at the Skydio 2 drone. It's a really interesting design. The unit itself looks like they've got a bottom section and a top section that are sandwiched between this blue frame. I really like the color scheme of this, but this nice blue frame is sort of the central point of it. Then the bottom is attached to that and the top's attached to that. Now on the top of the quad, you've got 3 cameras that are used for the autonomous flight, 2 on either side and 1 in the back. One thing I find interesting on this, and I'm going to have to do a little research, is that there are little fins right here. And aerodynamically, this one makes sense because I'm flying this direction. That'll help to keep the quad straight. But these two are actually diametrically opposed to the motion, so the wind's going to hit up against those. So I don't think they're there for aerodynamic purposes. My suspicion is they're there to sort of help the cameras decide where the stitching takes place. Remember, you've got to create this 360-degree bubble around the quad when you're flying, and each of these cameras have to know where their stitching ends and the next image begins, so maybe that's helping them figure out the stitching. On the bottom of the unit, again, you've got 3 additional cameras, 1, 2, and 3 right here. Same fins on the bottom. You've got a lock on here for your gimbal so that when you're not using it, you want to make sure the gimbal locks on nice and tight, and that keeps the gimbal from rattling around. The connection on the bottom for the battery is magnetic. And again, I'm curious about that because a big magnet like this close to a compass inside of a unit, they must have some pretty cool engineering to keep that magnet here from interfering with that true north magnet inside there. So the magnetics just basically get it close and it clicks in. It makes all of its connections on the back right here. They're very well protected, but I would be careful about dropping this down on the ground to get dirt and debris inside there. Same thing here. These seem pretty fragile. So my suggestion would be when you're transporting this in the case, you're okay, but if you're transporting it out of the case, make sure you keep the battery on it so these pins down here, which are pretty delicate, don't get bent, you don't get dirt inside there. Here's the micro SD slot. You can put a standard micro SD card in there. I've got a 64 giger in there, but you can put a bigger card in there as well. The charging port is on the top, and I mentioned this briefly before. I'm a little bit concerned about that, and I've got to spend some time figuring out if that's going to be an issue for me or not, but I'm not really comfortable having an open port on the top of the quad like that because, again, when you're flying it, gravity's not your friend. You're going to have dirt and debris falling down from the sky as you zip through the air, and that is going to find its way into that hole. Or if you're flying it and it gets a little bit rainy out or misty out, all that water is going to collect on the surfaces, and as you fly, it's going to be pushed back. It's going to find that hole. That hole leads directly down to the printed circuit board underneath, so that's sort of like an open manhole cover for all that water to get down inside across the electronics. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time trying to figure out a solution to plug that up when you're not charging it. Now, to charge the drone, you've actually put the battery in the bottom, and then you'll power up the drone and connect up the USB cable from here to the charger that came with the unit. I'm not nuts about that because that means I've got to power up the drone every time I want to charge my batteries, and that means the electronics are going to be powered all the time, and that's not something I'm really a big fan of. So I did order the 2 battery charger, which is a separate unit where you can clip 2 batteries to it and then connect up a USB-C connection to the charger and charge both the batteries. But if you've got a single battery or didn't buy that charging kit, you have to charge it through the drone. A couple other things I want to mention. The propellers have interesting markings on them, so I'll start with the top. Let's take a look at those. So you can see one has got sort of a blue banding and the other's got a silver banding. The way you remove those propellers, and again, if you have to change them, you want to make sure you match up blue with blue and silver with silver, but the way you change them is basically to hold the base like this and push down on the propeller. Let me get underneath it and make it a little easier. But if you hold the base and push down on the propeller and then twist the base, you can see how it pops off. And then the propeller's off. So to put it back on, you basically just center it on the pin, you push down again and twist the other direction, and there are 2 little arms that'll lock on top of that. Now, one thing I'm going to recommend is as you're flying this for a bit of time, you definitely want to make sure that these 2 are intact and they're not chipped. You also want to do an inspection on the propellers every so often to make sure that there's no issues with those. And one other minor detail, which I think is really interesting, and you'd miss it if you didn't look close, is that the back edge of this, not the leading edge, but the back edge, the trailing edge, has a little hook at the end. There's a little hook right there. And that aerodynamically helps to reduce the amount of noise this creates, because you want to have sort of all that wind heading back and off the back that way. So I bet that's there for noise reduction. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time listening to it, sort of comparing it to other quads in the market and how they actually generate noise and how it sounds next to those. But that's basically the overview of the quad itself. Now next we'll take a look at the Sky Beacon, and then we'll move on to the controller. Now I'll take a closer look at the Skydio 2 beacon. This accessory is sold as an add-on to the Skydio 2 drone, and I think it's a really good accessory to add to your kit, because even though you can control the drone directly from your phone over a Wi-Fi connection, most phones have a very weak Wi-Fi broadcast signal, which will limit your distance of control to about 200 meters. The minute you add the Skydio 2 beacon, you increase that distance to 1.5 kilometers. In addition to that, the unit has GPS and GLONASS inside, which will help to really accurately pinpoint your location to make it easier for the drone to follow you. Now, I'm going to talk about the technology in a minute and explain all the buttons and connections, but before I do, I have to comment on the packaging they've put together for all of their accessories. I think they've done an exceptionally good job with this, because anytime a new product like this comes out, the engineering team spends a lot of time deciding how big the product's going to be, what it looks like, what kind of features are built in, and they're really trying to design a product that separates them from everybody else in the market. And I think the Skydio engineering team has done a really good job of building a cool product that's got artificial intelligence built into it, autonomous flight, and in a lot of ways, it's a disruptive quad in the market that everybody else has got to pay attention to and really up their game. But once they finish with the engineering, the product has to be marketed, and the graphics department gets involved, and marketing gets involved, and they basically have to tell a story to the consumer of why that product is different. And that story starts with the packaging. And what Skydio's chosen to do here, I think, is pretty brave. They've actually taken a black box, essentially, and put a wireframe diagram on the front of it that mimics what the control looks like. Now, it's not a picture of the control, but it gives you enough information to know what's inside the box. But the minute I see that, even before I tear open the box, this picture immediately screams nerdy, future technology, advanced technology, heavy engineering. So I see that and get really excited about tearing open the box, but I immediately know what's in there. It's the beacon. I can tell just looking at it. The other thing that's interesting is there's no branding on this. There's no Skydio logo or name or anything on front. They really want you to focus on that diagram, which again, to me, speaks volumes about the engineering behind the technology. Now, they did put the name of the product on the side. It's black on black right there, kind of subtle. And on the bottom, they've got a tiny little logo. Now, most other companies don't spend that much time thinking about the packaging, and they'll put a basic white box out with a picture of the unit and maybe their big logo on the top of it, and it's pretty boring. And I've spent a lot of time in my career around marketing and development of products, and I can tell you this is a pretty risky move to start off with this radical a package. And I'll also tell you that this is very iconic. And you're going to see other companies that are going to copy this down the road. And when you see those other packages, you're going to look at this and think, that was first seen on a Skydio product. So these guys are really setting themselves apart, not only from the technology, but from the marketing side of it as well. So good on you guys at Skydio for that. All right, let's take a look at the tech. So the actual beacon itself is very lightweight. It fits in the palm of your hand really well. It's easy to grip it. It's made out of high-impact plastic. On the bottom of the unit, there's a little bit of a speaker vent in the back, and you've got a little slot here where you can put a lanyard on it to keep it on your wrist. So I imagine if you're on a skateboard or a bike, you might want to keep it on your wrist. On the front of the unit, you've got an LCD display in the top right here. You've got two buttons, two arrows, and these increase, I should say, they change the direction of where it is. So if you tap on this one, it'll swing around this way. If you tap on that one, it'll swing around that way when it's following you. This is the power button. Again, subtle, but it is that Skydio logo right there. And then below that, you've got a plus and a minus. Plus increases the distance away from you, and minus increases or decreases the distance towards you. So if you want it to fly further away, tap that. If you want it to swing around right, tap that one. This is the power button to turn it off. So if you hold that, it'll actually power down the remote. It also forces the drone to land. So very simple unit to use, very, very intuitive in a lot of ways, and I think they've done a really good job with it. Also included in the package is a getting started guide, which gives you really simple diagrams to explain how you can sync up the remote with the actual Skydio. So how to connect the beacon right to the drone, charge it up first, connect it up to the drone, turn it on, it'll immediately pair up. And then there's a really simple diagram right there that'll explain pretty much the buttons I just went over. So again, beautiful packaging, great looking product. I think Skydio is really going to shake up the market a lot with their technology. Now we'll take a closer look at the Skydio 2 controller. Again, the box has got that same wireframe diagram of the controller inside, very high-tech looking. On the side of the box, they've got the word controller, so you know what you're buying. And on the front, a really tiny Skydio logo. And again, I love that they're staying consistent with the branding of these products. Once you open up the box, you'll find the controller inside. There's a getting started guide, and underneath the plastic insert, you'll find two short cables. These are about 12 inches long. This one's a USB-C to an Apple Lightning. Then they also include another 12-inch USB-C to USB-C. This end connects to the back of the controller. The other end will connect to your phone. Now, if you've got an Apple phone, you're good. If you've got a newer Android phone or a tablet, you can connect this up as well, as long as it's USB-C. I do find it interesting that it didn't include a USB-C to micro, so I'm not sure if they don't support older phones like that or older tablets like that, but I'll definitely do some checking and testing and see what we come up with. But very nice cables, very heavy duty, make it really easy to connect. The Getting Started guide shows you how to connect the controller up to your drone. You've got to sync it up the first time so that the drone knows the controller can talk to it. You'll charge up the controller, open it up. You'll connect up the USB-C connection from the back of the controller right into the drone. Power both units up. The syncing will take place, and once it binds the first time, you're good to go. And then you'll disconnect it from the drone and connect it up to your phone, and you can put your phone in the holder and actually start flying. So let's take a closer look at the controller. Get the box out of the way. So the controller is pretty straightforward. It is a Skydio controller that was made by Parrot, and we've talked about that before. I think it's a great design. I really like the Parrot controller. It's very comfortable in your hands. It's got a good weight to it. The way you use the controller, there's no on-off button. The way you power it up is just opening up this fold here, and that immediately powers up the controller. The other thing it does, which I think is really clever, is that the antennas are right here. So when you power this thing up and you flip it up, you'll mount your phone in here. It's expansive, but you're also putting these antennae in the perfect direction, facing downfield and flat against your transmission pattern. So it kind of forces you into the perfect place to have the antennas broadcasting downfield. Inside the little hinge assembly, there are two buttons here. The first one here is the home button. That's a return to home button. If you hit that, it'll come back to your takeoff point. The one below it is your launch and land button. So if you want to automatically launch it, you hit that, it'll take off and hover. If you want to land it, you hit that, it'll land. You can also do the same startup by pulling both sticks in and down and then fly the unit. Joysticks are pretty much standard on all the drones that are out there, so you use this to elevate and descend. You can spin the quad this way. This will go forward, this will go back, this will go right and left. Okay, pretty straightforward. On the back of the unit, you've got a couple of different controls. You've got, on this side is your record button, so you can take a picture or you can start recording with this one. This one's kind of interesting. It's a boost button, so I think when you're flying it, if you hold this, it's going to get a lot faster. It's going to go into like ludicrous speed, which is a reference to Spaceballs, but it allows you to go a lot faster with the drone. So when you're flying it, hit that, and you'll get that boosting speed zipping by. On this side, it's controlling the gimbal up and down, so the gimbal actually can pivot down or pivot up, and that's what this is used for. On this side, you've got digital focus, or I should say digital zoom, that allows you to zoom in and zoom out, which is pretty cool. There's your USB-C connection. You'll also use that to charge the controller. So the USB-C connection will be used with the standard controller that comes with it, and there's an LED to the right of it, and that'll be off if it's not doing anything. The minute you plug in a charger and start charging it, if it needs to be charged, it'll be red, and once it's fully charged, that'll turn green, so you know you've actually fully charged the unit. That's pretty much it. Not a lot to see on the bottom. But again, I like the form factor of this controller. It's small enough and light enough, and it's really comfortable in your hand. So I think they've done a great job partnering with Parrot to actually build a controller for the Skydio 2. In this section, I wanted to pass along a few tips for charging your Skydio 2 as well as your accessories, because this drone has some pretty specific charging requirements, and your first clue should have been the battery. If you check closely, you'll notice it's an 11.4 volt battery. Now that's important. And it's got 4280 milliampere hours of capacity, which means this little battery pack will keep this drone up in the air for a long time on a full charge. Where it gets tricky is the charging port in the back is a standard USB-C connection. So you might be thinking, I've got a lot of chargers laying around the house, I've got a computer I can hook it up to, all I need to do is buy a cable that'll connect up with a USB-C end on it and I can charge my drone. The problem is, most of those chargers are standard USB chargers that have a 5 volt output and maybe an amp or two, and you can't charge an 11 volt battery with a 5 volt charger. So Skydio thought of that. They've included a really nice heavy duty charger that's also PD or power delivery capable, which means it's smart enough to check the battery when it first connects and determine what voltage and current it can send to that battery to safely and quickly charge it. They've also included a really nice heavy duty cable that's got a USB-C on both ends. So to use that charger, you plug it into the wall. Now before you connect it up to the drone, make sure you've taken the gimbal lock off the front, because if this drone decides to go into power on self-test, it's going to want to wiggle that gimbal around in the front, and if you've got a lock on there, you can damage the motor. So always pop that off when you're charging it, but then you basically connect it to your drone. It's going to take a second to negotiate, and then you'll see it pop on and start to strobe charging. So it does a real good job of charging the drone quickly and safely. The challenge is, if you've got multiple batteries, you've got to rotate those through to get them all charged. Now you can buy that multi-battery charger, which is what I did, which allows me to charge them outside of the drone, and I think that's a good solution. But even still, I've got accessories that need to be charged as well. And for me, I'm a very impatient guy. I want to get outside and fly. And anytime I'm wasting charging stuff is time that I'm not outside up in the air. So I wanted to come up with a way to charge all my accessories while I was charging my batteries. Now, I could very simply add 3 more of the USB chargers, put cables together with USB-Cs in the end and charge all these devices, but then I've got 3 chargers and cables all over the place. So I love these kind of engineering challenges. So I went to the team at Drone Valley and said, look, can't we design a cable that has 3 connectors on it that'll allow me to charge all 3 devices from a single charger? And that's exactly what we did. So we call it the Hydra 3, which has got a USB-A connection on one end and 3 USB-C connections on the other end. So you plug this into any standard USB charger or your computer, and all 3 of these connections become active at the same time, so it allows you to charge all of your devices simultaneously. Now, the other thing we did was build this to be as high a current as possible, so it'll handle 2.5 amps for each of these connections. So if you have a heavy-duty charger, that's great. You want to use a charger that at least is 2 amps because they're going to drink a lot of electrons, and the bigger current you can provide, the safer you can charge these and the faster you can charge them. But essentially, you can use any standard USB charger, plug this end in, plug it into the wall. And again, the beacon has got a USB-C connection on the back. I'll plug that in. Now the beacon's charging. The controller's got a USB-C connection. I'll plug that in. And that's charging. Now you're thinking, well, that's a USB-C connection, Rick. What if I've got an Apple product or an older phone that uses micro USB? Well, if you've got a newer Android phone, you can plug it directly in. But if you've got an Apple phone or an older phone, you're not going to be able to use this. So we thought of that. And we're including in the kit 2 adapters that convert the USB-C on this end to a micro USB, or the USB-C on this end to an Apple connection. Now in my case, I've got an Apple product, so I basically snap the adapter on the end, I plug it into my phone, and I'm off and running. And I can charge all 3 devices at the same time. So it's just a really quick way to charge the batteries in the drone, heavy duty kind of charging going on here with more of a trickle charge over here at about 1 amp each of these. So when these finish, these will be done and I can head out and start flying. Now you might also be thinking, Rick, I don't even want to buy an extra charger. Why can't I just use this cable with the charger that came with the Skydio? Well, the challenge there is that this cable's got a USB-A connection on it because we wanted to make it as compatible as possible for chargers you may have laying around. But you're right, if you want to use the charger that came with the Skydio, that's a USB-C connection. We thought of that as well. So we're also including a USB-A to USB-C connection you can slide on this end. And when you make that connection, you now have a USB-C end that you can plug into the original charger and charge all these devices simultaneously. So it allows you to use one charger to charge all your batteries, a heavy-duty charger to charge all your accessories, or you can use a second charger to charge them. So we give you a lot of flexibility there. So if you're interested in this product, I've got a link below to the Skydio accessories page. We've got a few other Skydio accessories on that page, but we think this is a pretty cool cable. And for me, charging quickly and getting back out and flying is really what it's all about. So I don't want to spend a lot of time watching lights blink. I want to get outside, put the drone up in the air, and just have a lot of fun with it. So that's all I had to say in this section. I hope the overview and closer looks were helpful in showing you what the Skydio 2 and the accessories are all about. Now, I have a lot more clips planned for this guy over the next few weeks. I'm going to take him out in the field and set up a series of torture tests where I'm going to try and see how good the artificial intelligence really is for tracking me. And I'll do that with the cell phone, the beacon, and the controller, just so we can see the differences between them. My suspicion is I'm not going to be able to shake this guy, especially if I'm carrying the beacon or the controller. It's going to lock on that GPS signal, and I'll duck behind a tree. And I bet when I come out from behind the tree, it's right there waiting for me. So it'll be kind of cool to see how spooky this really is for tracking people. I will compare it as well to a Mavic 2 Pro, Mavic 2 Zoom, the Paradinafi, and the Autel Evo, just to give you a real good comparison between the technologies these different drones are using. I'll put some footage up of pictures and videos so you can gauge which of those you like best in case you're in the market for a drone like this. That way you have a little bit more information to help you make that decision. I have to say, though, out of the gate, that I really am excited about this. You can tell that. This drone, to me, represents sort of a disruptor in the market space. It's different than all the other drones that are out there. So all those other drones I mentioned a minute ago do a pretty good job of crash avoidance, and they've had that feature for quite some time, and all of them do it different ways, but they all do a pretty good job that if you're flying through a landscape and you come up to something that you're going to run into, it'll stop you from running into that. That's crash avoidance. What the Skydio 2 is doing is different. It's not crash avoidance, it's autonomous flight, which is a whole lot more complicated because the drone has to look at an environment. Again, it takes 1 million points that it analyzes every second to find not only the things that it could run into, but finding a path through those things. So it's got to have the artificial intelligence and deep neural networks to actually think almost like a supercomputer flying. It's got to think about what's the best path through that bramble that this guy Rick is running through that I want to chase him through. So I think it's got a lot more intelligence than the other ones. It's running the Jetson chipset, which I talked about before, is that Internet of Things chipset. It's really what's used for a lot of the cutting edge devices on the market today. all those brains are inside this product, and it's built to do one thing really well, and that's follow you. So we're going to see how good it does that over the next couple of weeks. But I think that this is going to herald in a new market for the drones. I think all the other companies I talked about a minute ago are hard at work at something that does similar things to this with their next generation of drones. And I have to say to Skydio, good on you guys for pushing this industry forward, because I'm a huge fan of competition. And when something like this comes out, it's good for all of us. All of us that are flying today are going to benefit from a company like this that's taking risks to build a product that's different, that sort of rocks the other guys back on their heels for a second. Then when they lean back in, everybody gets better. So I think it's a really good thing for all of us. So that's all I really had for today. I'm sorry if the clip was a little longer than normal. I'm hoping you're going to fast forward to the parts that you like. I promise you there'll be a lot more cool content coming. And we're also working on a lot of accessories for the brand new Skydio 2 as well. I've got a car charger for it that works really well. We've got a multi-headed cable that's coming. We're probably going to work on some kind of cover for that charging port in the back. I've got a bunch of stuff in the works. So stay tuned to the channel. If you need the accessories, hit our website and you can find them there. And until next time, thanks for watching and happy flying. Thank you.